Thanks for checking out my video. If you want to learn more from me, I have a lot of classes on Udemy. You can find the links to a lot of those in the description. All right. Hey again, everybody. So, what I wanted to talk about today is the mountains of Masshu. So, if you are not familiar with that term, maybe you haven't read the Simon Necronomicon, in which case I have a whole playlist on that. And that's one of the biggest things that this channel is about. But if you haven't read the Simon Necronomicon or the Epic of Gilgamesh, maybe you haven't heard of the Mountains of Masshu before. So, let me pull up some notes and whatnot because I'm back to making these videos and I'm back to taking notes. So if you've been on this channel for a while, then you kind of know what I'm talking about. At least I didn't leave anything upstairs this time. Anyways, so in the testimony of the Mad Arab part 1 in the Simon Necronomicon, it says that he went to the mountains of Masshu, and this is where the story begins. Of course, the Simon Necronomicon it's got the grimoire in the middle with the Book of Calling, the Book of Entrance, and of the Walking, the 50 Names of Marduk, the Maklu text, and the Eurelia text. I think I might be missing one or two. Oh yeah, the Fire God and the Watcher. Um, Anyways, so that's wrapped with a story in the testimony of the Mad Arab part 1 it says that he was walking in the mountains of Masshu. Now, interestingly, the mountains of Masshu are spelled Masshu in the book, if I remember correctly. Now, this could just be one of those things where when we translate stuff from one language to another, some people might put two S's, some people might only put one S. But in a lot of the sources that I found, from Wikipedia to a bunch of different things on the Epic of Gilgamesh, then we find that Masshu is spelled Mashu. Okay, now you're like, dude, you've talked enough about the name. What the hell is it? So, the mountains of Masshu in the Epic of Gilgamesh are twin mountain peaks. It's a mountain that's got two peaks on it, and it's supposed to be covered with a ton of cedar trees. And it's guarded by scorpion men, and this is also kind of interesting. They're called scorpion men, but they're said to be half man and half dragon. So where's the scorpion thing come from? Maybe I'll research that and get back to you. But the mountains of Masshu, the peaks were said to reach the banks of heaven, and it was a cedar-covered mountain. Now, cedar is a sacred tree to a lot of Mesopotamian deities. That's why in the Simon Necronomicon practices, you would burn pine, sandalwood, or which one? Cedar, right? So, according to the testimony of the Mad Arab, part 1, you have him hiking in the mountains. He's living as a beggar and whatnot, and he stumbles on these cultists doing a ritual, and then in the mountains of Masshu. And when he's found out, when they discover that he's there, I was trying to see if I can find something in my pocket. But anyways, when they discover that he's there, they chase him. And then he's running. And I think he hides behind a bush or something. And then he doesn't hear any noise anymore, and he just sees a bunch of robes sitting on the ground, and there's like goo in the robes. So these people vanished, or did they? But when he goes back up the mountain to the site where these cultists were gathering, that's where he finds a stone. I'm trying to remember the name off the top of my head, but so the stone has the three seals of Masshu on it. They're probably so named because that's where he found them. It's the Ara, the Aga, and the Bandar. And these three seals represent a lot of different things. You know, you have the Bandar being of the Watcher, you have the Ara being the sign of the covenant between gods and men, and you have the Aga being the sign of the elder gods. Now, these, according to my research, and I lean heavily on psychology and different stuff, this could be the three levels of reality. This could be the three levels of the mind, ego, super ego, and id, and among other things. Now let me see what else is in my notes here. So the mountains of Masshu, the twin mountains, they're supposed to be like the gateway between the world of at least the gateway that Shamash / Utu uses to go between the waking world and the underworld, because it's supposed to, the sun sets in between the mountains and then it goes into the underworld and then it comes back up later. And Now, let's talk about the Scorpion Man. So, the Scorpion Man is mentioned in the Simon Necronomicon, where he knows the gate, but he knows of the gate, but doesn't know the gate. And that's one of the, I believe it's in the Testimony of the Mad Arab Part 2, where you're supposed to be able to work with him when it comes to furthering your gate walking processes and such. We're probably talking about the Ulhe or the Shiny Herd at that point. But now, it says that the Scorpion Man is half man, half dragon, right? So let's kind of see where that goes. So we know that in a lot of different cultures, dragons were seen as like guardians of different things and different places, like places of knowledge or places that people were not supposed to go. And, you can have the westernized idea of dragons where they're like really big bad creatures, and the only thing that we do with them is we slay them and kill them. But I don't like that kind of thing. The idea with dragons is that they are very, very, they're sacred, almost arguably immortal beings that guard knowledge, or in this case, sacred places. I really wonder why they call them scorpion men, but that's beside the point. Maybe that's just because that's something that they could attribute the the attributes of the particular beings to, because they had the references of scorpions in their own lives. So when they looked at this other thing, they're like, huh, it kind of looks like a scorpion. I don't know. A lot of these dragons, you can kind of synonymize them with serpents. They don't really have wings. They're really, really big snakes, I guess you could say, kind of like the rainbow snake in Australia, or a lot of the eastern kinds of dragons, like those in Legend of Zelda: Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom, where they don't have wings. The ones with wings, which you could argue are dragons or reverns, depending on how many legs that they have, are more of a westernized idea, where they have 2 or 4 legs and wings. So, now, Gilgamesh traveled the mountain, and so we're going back to the Epic of Gilgamesh here. But Gilgamesh, on his quest for seeking eternal life, which happened because of, well, trauma, because he pissed off Inanna, and she killed Enkidu. And then Gilgamesh was like, oh my god, death happens. I don't want to die. What do I do? So he's looking for, I believe it's his grandfather, Utnapishtim, which translates to he whose days are long. And he ends up going to the mountains of Masshu, and he actually gained entrance into the mountain, or passage, by the Scorpion Man, and he ends up going into a tunnel. Now, mountains in a lot of different cultures, I should have said this a little bit before, but they are definitely seen as sacred places. If you look at the Chomolungma or Mount Everest, anytime that somebody hikes that mountain, they're supposed to give offerings at the bottom. The same kind of practices are held in South America in the Andes with the Caro tradition, where you're going to go hike up a mountain, you give a hierarchy/despacho as an offering before you hike up there, because you're asking for permission, right? And so he does end up finding Utnapishtim, and he does end up finding that the elixir of life, I guess you could say, or the eternal life thing, is a flower that lives at the bottom of a lake. And he ends up getting it, but then he loses it. So, sucks to be him. Anyways, let me see. Going through my notes. So, yeah. I love it when I write notes and then I end up talking all the way through them, because I have this kind of as a guide, but at the same time, it shows that everything kind of stays in here. So, as old as I'm getting, my memory is actually working quite well. Now, the interesting thing with the mountains of Masshu, another interesting thing, if you look into the Simon Necronomicon and whatnot, is the entire book talks about the ancient ones are bad. Don't do anything with the ancient ones. The worshippers of the ancient ones are terrible, and blah 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 blah. And they work their ceremonies at mountaintops. But then later on in the book, it says you're supposed to work, if you can, work your rituals and ceremonies at mountaintops. So are they really that bad? That's one of those tricks, traps, and whatnot. I'm trying to remember the third word, but Mountains are associated, of course, with the heavens. That's why you have a ton of different, like, look at Mount Olympus. The gods live up there. You know, Chomolungma, Mount Everest. I think the Indian name for it, I'm trying to remember the Indian name for it. I just remember the Tibetan one because of my proclivity for Tibetan Buddhism. Um, that I think it means like heaven's abode or something like that. But a lot of mountains are, of course, associated with deities, and it's said that they live up there. So you have the mountains of Masshu as a gateway for a god to go from the living world to Ganzir, and it's got a arguably divine protector there. And then you have a tunnel that leads through the mountain that Gilgamesh took, and it's covered by these sacred trees. You can find so many different traditions around the world that have mountains that are sacred, and they're seen as different, as like almost like a gateway between, or a way to reach the same level as gods, because of course in a lot of ascending traditions, which, not in all ascending traditions, because some traditions are descending, but they still see gods as being above. Um, you'll find that they say that gods or different spirits live up there, and if you anger them, then that's no good for you. I mean, even with Mount Everest, you're not allowed to take any like rocks or anything away from it. You know, despite the fact that people leave a ton of trash and stuff there all the time. I actually got a piece of a ladder from Mount Everest that was from a cleanup expedition in 2017. It's in my Karo Kipu bundle. Represent those higher energies. Speaking of which, if you want me to talk more about the Andean Karo tradition stuff, I'm probably going to start getting into that, but let me know if you're interested. But the mountains of Mashu are a very, very interesting place if you're following the allegory and the context of the Simon Necronomicon, because you want to kind of emulate those different things in your practices and whatnot. So I would spend some time up at the highest places that you can get to. I have a couple of mountains around here, and I've been to several of them, at least three of them that I can name off the top of my head. But I did go the next state over, and I found an even higher mountain that I hiked quite a bit of. And there is something different about the energies on mountains versus the energies of, you know, lakes and valleys and whatnot. Getting in touch with these different energies and doing spiritual practices there is going to arguably get you closer on your spiritual journey, regardless of what that is. So, yeah, rant and ramble over. Anyways, the Mountains of Mashu is a very, very interesting topic because it puts a little bit more of the Simon Necronomicon and some ancient legends into context. It's not entirely known where the Mountain of Mashu is, Mountains of Mashu, interchangeable, I guess. But arguably, I would think that it's in the Zagros Mountains, which is to the east of Mesopotamia, because, of course, the sun would rise from there. Anyways, let me know what you think about this one. Definitely let me know any video topics that you might want me to do. You can always email me. Check the link in the description for my website, my books, my classes, and what have you. And then, if you like this one, give it a like and subscribe if you haven't, because I got videos that happen every single week on spirituality, magic, mythology, ancient religion, modern religion, critiques on those different things, and some magical knowledge. Anyways, good hunting.